Hi everyone, thanks for watching. You can support our work on our website, ageoftruthtv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, BitChute and Brighteon. And remember to hit the bell for notifications. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To be sure not to miss any of our shows, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website, ageoftruthtv.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 17th of October 2024, and this is part 2 in our series featuring a very special gentleman from America with a horrendous past. He is a former Satanic Ritual Abuse survivor, a survivor of sexual abuse, and a Montauk Project survivor. He has a startling, eye-opening, hair-raising, and controversial story to tell. And this is part 2 with Alandra Markman. Good evening from Copenhagen, Denmark, and welcome to all of our viewers on Age of Truth TV. Please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. We are back with part 2 of this startling, hair-raising, and fascinating conversation with our special guest today, who's joining us from Mount Shasta. Once again, welcome on the show, Alandra Markman.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We had a very, let's say, controversial conversation the last time, and we went very in-depth, and you explained to the audience a lot of your very horrendous experiences as a child in this lifetime, on this timeline, right? And we're gonna still cover some of that because we didn't get to cover all of it. I don't think we will ever cover all of it, but at least some of these questions we didn't get to ask.
I do my best to kind of sense into those areas of darkness and share what I can. And sometimes I surprise myself lately during interviews, and I'll just say something that I didn't even consciously remember, but it just comes out. And sometimes, you know, the context makes an opportunity for going into the memory more, and also for going past my own blocks more. So this is also a helpful process for me.
A lot is still blocked from your memory.
Yeah.
So how are you able to go in there? Is it still painful for you? Is it an emotional journey when we talk about this, or are you more comfortable with it, if you could ever be comfortable with it today, because you've done it quite a lot?
Yeah, I'm mostly pretty comfortable with it. I'm comfortable being surprised. I'm constantly surprised. And every time I think I've gotten to the floor, you know, there's more below there. So this is a very common experience for ritual abuse and space program survivors. Yeah.
Do you think you can ever be, or anyone who's experienced this, do you think you can ever be fully deprogrammed?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
Fully, absolutely, to retrieve all memories.
Yes, it's definitely possible.
Have you talked to other Satanic Ritual Abuse survivors? Have you been able to discuss all of this and really go in depth and sort of talk about their experiences? Has it been like a healing process for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've done a lot of organizing with other survivors, and I work with a lot of other survivors in my coaching practice. So I'm in the habit of talking to other survivors. Yeah. And we go deep, definitely.
Would you say you've come a long way?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then we're also going to talk about your other lifetime, a version of you, I guess your soul essence that were manifested again in a physical body. Like, you have a lot of explaining to do, and
Hmm.
we'll hear about your experiences on the Montauk base, being a Montauk Project survivor as well. And you were sent
Hmm.
on extreme missions and you saw a lot, and we'll talk about time travel and everything concerning that. Of course, we have covered a lot about the Montauk Project on Age of Truth TV. We also had Stuart Swerdlow on the show, and he obviously was there in this life. So I don't know if you can address a lot of that, and we can talk about this in a little while. But Alandra, let's go back to our first conversation, which was you in this present time, and you as a child
Hmm.
being part of this satanic group of people and being exposed to all of this sexual ritual magic and all of that. So there was a lot of experiences with people, let's say high-ranking, top elite people from these elite circles. So take us back to where you left us, or where we left off, I think, in our last interview, part one. A memory of your childhood that you were taken to different places. You talk about castles. You were taken to
Hmm.
England, but and also you talked about what happened in America. But you
Hmm.
also mentioned something about, was it going to a place in Little Italy or Chinatown in a and being put in a cage?
Sure. I had a handler at that time. So I would probably be about 3 or 4 when I was initially brought into this handler's company. So people that are going through the ritual abuse experience, a lot of them are bought and sold. There's a very heavy trafficking element. And so individual buyers of the victims will get to use them for different purposes for different amounts of time. It's not just buying, it's also renting. People pay tons and tons of money to essentially traffic and rape and otherwise use these ritual abuse survivors. Um, so I was bought and sold to a lot of different handlers who used me for different purposes. One of the most memorable was a guy named Louis Valou who essentially set me up to be fighting other children professionally, like as um, yeah, I mean for entertainment, I guess, of the people watching, and also so they could extract dark energy from it and sustain their negative spiritual practices. Um, so I was made into a fighter and had to fight other children in a variety of situations. The one that I was speaking about uh, was cage matches that were taking place generally, well, a lot of different places underground, different secret locations. The one I was talking about was in Chinatown in New York City, specifically in the Five Points area of Chinatown, which historically has been a stronghold for all sorts of organized crime, not just ritual abuse, but things that are more public knowledge now. Um, so yeah, in that area, I was forced to fight other children, often to the death, and it was an extremely humiliating and degrading experience. Yeah, dehumanizing. My trainer had been through the same thing when he was young. So he had what I'd consider real empathy for me at many moments. And he taught me how to fight dirty and, how to survive the matches. And there were a lot of tricks and yeah, it was not obviously not honorable in any way. Um, but yeah, that was a big part of my life for a number of years.
But you were like 3 or 4 years old at the time?
Yeah, when I started the training with him, and then the heaviest time um, of the fighting, it's hard to say exactly, but probably 6 to 9 or something like that.
From 6 to 9, you were fighting these battles with other children, often
Yeah,
winning and often killing them.
yeah,
So I mean, so you were programmed and trained to do this. Were you programmed to win this fight and they were programmed to lose? Because it could have cost, I mean, you could have died, right?
easily. Yeah. And I came very close a number of times. Um, it's hard to say. I don't, exactly what's at play there. I'm sure some of us were programmed to lose. Um, and there were times when I maybe should have lost and I didn't. Um, it's very hard to say. It was obviously beyond my control. Um, so the handlers for the children are going to have all sorts of different things that they're trying. It's, I guess a little bit like organized sports. I don't want to normalize it, but um, yeah, you have your coaches and they're trying to train you. And um, I guess, I mean, I think there were times when I was expected to die and I didn't. And I can only speculate as to the reasons. I know I had a lot of spiritual help. I have a very strong spiritual team that's been very active in keeping me alive and helping me realize myself.
I mean,
Um,
on an esoteric level,
yeah,
yes, a spiritual team of non-physical entities
yeah, basically.
that were protecting you.
Yeah,
So, I mean, what happens in those fights? I mean, you were a child and the other children were the same age, I would assume. I mean,
yeah.
did you use tools or your hands or what happened?
Sometimes bare hands, sometimes with weapons. I would usually have some sort of concealed weapon, which is part of why I'm alive, like on a more obvious level. Um, concealed uh, concealed sharps, needles and knives and things like this. Concealed toxins, poisons. Um, there again, there's a lot of trickery going on. So in a fight that's supposed to be with bare hands and without tools, often there were hidden tools that I was using. Yeah.
But the other children did not have hidden tools.
Some of them probably did. I mean, it's not like there's a there's an impartial authority that's that's screening everything. This is very illegitimate. So, um,
But
you know,
nothing that hurt you or made you or compromised your situation in life.
nothing, nothing that hurt me.
No, I
Sorry.
mean, did they use tools, the other children, on
Oh
you?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean I received training on things to look out for, places where sharps could be hidden and stuff like that. And so I had training for that and occasionally I was able to disarm other children. Um, yeah.
it sounds a little bit, of course, insane, but I mean, a little bit like Fight Club, that movie, just a children's version of it and people watching. Or do you
Yeah.
remember that Mad Max movie, Beyond Thunderdome, where these were fighting inside of this dome?
Yeah, it's not unlike that. Yeah.
But I mean, why in Chinatown? You obviously talked about these people being well connected to mobsters and all of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, people from the upper echelon were there as well, right? Who did you see
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Who was there in Chinatown watching you fight other children?
Quite a lot of adults. I mean, I don't know most of their identities, but they definitely acted like high rollers. They'd show up in expensive suits and smoking cigars and things like that. So sometimes just very obvious, ostentatious displays of wealth, and other times they just looked like normal people. But there was always the vibe that it was really life or death. Like if anybody who didn't know about this found out about it, they would be killed. So it was extremely secretive and, an extremely, uh, I guess I'll say tight-knit community. Yeah,
So they had to take an oath or something in order to participate in these rituals, not only there, but also other rituals that you were part of.
I would assume so. Yeah, I mean the cult really drills loyalty into people and programs them very extensively to be loyal to the cult and disloyal to everything else. I mean, disloyal to each other, disloyal to themselves, obviously disloyal to civil society. So yeah, there's very, very intense loyalty there.
So there is a lot of infighting between these high rollers.
Absolutely. Everybody's scheming against everybody. That's just part of the deal. It's a scramble for power. There's constant betrayal. Yeah.
But they're all working for one end goal, implementing the New World Order, right?
Some consciously, some unconsciously. I mean, most of these guests are probably not very conscious of those larger societal goals. That's for the higher ups. That's for people in intelligence communities and the Draco and the Zeta Reticulans, like the beings that are more and other people that are really attuned to the long-term vision and the long-term plan. Um, I mean, I'm sure some of the witnesses of the cage matches were tuned into that stuff, but a lot of them weren't.
Did you see any celebrities or politicians there?
Um, in that specific context, I'm not recalling anybody that I can name. Yeah,
But you certainly did, well, did other places. And you were also, were you taken to that Mothers of Darkness castle in Belgium that we hear a lot about? Former MK
absolutely.
Ultra
Yeah,
victims were
absolutely.
there. You
Hmm.
were.
Yeah, yeah.
Please talk about that and go in depth about what happened and what took place there. This will be interesting hearing it from your perspective.
Okay. I still don't have full memories of those times. So this is something I'm actively working with. But most of us who were in the cult at a high level were brought through Belgium. Belgium's like an international trafficking center for all the high level cult assets. So, yeah. So basically, anybody who is having advanced black magic worked on them, as a lifelong thing, they're probably going to pass through Belgium at some point. Um, so yeah, so I went to that castle and I experienced a lot of these it's a specific order within the cult that worships the dark feminine and they're very uh chaotic and it's a very, very high energy. These are very advanced people, like spiritually advanced. They're very, very evil, but also very advanced. And yeah, practicing black magic on a high level, functioning essentially as vessels for uh you can say the female version of Satan. And yeah, I had some training with these people and I was trafficked through various parts of Belgium, not just in castles and more rural areas, but also through cities like Antwerp. I had a lot of experiences there. Um, yeah, so it's a widespread thing, and it's historically one of the centers of power for the cult.
Belgium.
Yeah,
So inside this Mothers of Darkness castle, it's focusing on these mother goddesses, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Dark Mother, the destructive mother archetype. Yeah. And I had a lot of personal programming related to that. I mean, my own biological mother also had very, very intense training, to just defy reason and live in as dark a state as possible. Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced there, if you can remember some of it? You remember this darkness and this special kind of, but very satanic, evil energy there, and a lot of people have
Hmm.
talked about that. But
Hmm.
I mean, why is it specifically, why do they focus on the feminine power, the dark feminine power, there? Because a lot of males attend those rituals as well, and you are
Yeah.
a male, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. This is true. Um, well, in a general sense, the higher level cult leadership is very tuned into the energies of the land and the energies of the earth. And so the locations they choose are going to be places where the energy of the land is very high, and they can siphon it and pervert it and use it for their purposes. But a lot of these major cult sites are also just natural sites where the energy of the earth is very high. And yeah, you can use that energy for different purposes.
Are they on a ley line or what?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not super knowledgeable about ley lines, but I can definitely sense when I'm on a major cross point of them. And yeah, that castle's on one.
Do they
Hmm.
open portals to another dimension?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
How is
things,
that? So technically, take people through that. Please explain how they're able to do that.
when there's a heightened spiritual vibration, a lot of things become possible that are otherwise impossible. Many miracles can happen. Um, and obviously, they're not being used for spiritual growth in this context, but um, like things that Beth Gooby writes about that I have also seen, for instance, is like spontaneous healing in the moment. Like someone gets stabbed and the wound heals right before your eyes, things like this. Um, I've definitely seen that happen. Um, and then sometimes people killed during rituals will, right then and there, you can sense their spirit like coming forth, as a palpable presence, as a ghost, as it were, and holding forth just like it was a living person, in the room right before your eyes. So I witnessed that. Um, there's a lot of these. I'm tempted to call them cheap party tricks um, that happen during these rituals.
But were they cheap party tricks? This sounds, of course, um, incredible to, and will sound incredible to a lot of people. But I mean,
Yeah,
do you think what you saw and what other people have seen there is that real, seeing like a ghost or an interdimensional soul spirit of a person that was just killed?
yeah. For me, it's real. Obviously, I invite your viewers to use their discernment about this. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that was a real spiritual experience.
And who took part in this event, this ritual? I mean, how many and how were they placed? What did it look like? What were they wearing?
Yeah. Some of the larger ones were in a very large hall where they could accommodate probably over 200 people. So, they would give banquets, and some of these were pretty large scale events. There's a lot of space inside the castle. So, I mean, some of them were smaller scale, obviously. Um, but there were events where you'd have hundreds of people. They'd be openly eating human flesh and openly participating in these things, in these acts of violence. So, sometimes it was a very large scene. Um, and yeah, that obviously can feel very overwhelming, especially as a small child. Um, yeah,
Well,
and
to
in
say
terms
the
of,
least. I mean, this is outrageous. But I mean, so so they were doing these sacrifices of these what grown-ups or children or what, and then they were like
different,
feasting on it afterwards.
yeah, different. I mean, depending on the ritual, there are lots of different situations. I mean, one of the ones that really sticks in my mind was a banquet where essentially everybody was eating uh, dead babies. I mean, eating parts of infants that had been cooked. So uh, that's something that really stands out in my memory. Something that made me extremely nauseous in the moment. Um, so that's obviously very sensational, but um,
Did they ever make you eat human flesh?
yes, I had to.
You had to.
Yes.
Uh, hmm Can you talk about that? Even though it's not a nice topic, obviously. But I mean,
Yeah.
is it, please explain. I mean, this is very outrageous to a lot of people, but if we have to talk about this, which is important, we have to go in depth and, try and describe it as much as we can. You can.
Yeah. I I appreciate that intention. Yeah. Um, there are a lot of euphemisms for human flesh that the cult uses. Long pork is a very common one. So, that's part of the Abrahamic religions, prohibiting the consumption of pork is uh, partly because the texture is very much like human flesh. Um, so there's like some, actual reason for that prohibition. Um, and yeah, the cult people will talk about it in euphemisms. And there are a lot of different names for it. I mean, they almost never say like we're going to eat human flesh, in a direct way. Um, I'm sure it does happen, but yeah, but everything's, they really pride themselves uh, on being in the know. They have all these code words. It's a very conceited kind of energy, and they look down on people that haven't been initiated into this and don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, they'll say all kinds of things. Um, but yeah, the comparison to pork is very common. And
Well,
other,
can I just jump in quickly here? I
yeah.
do not want to interrupt you because we would love to have a flow from you when you describe this. But I mean, some people do suggest that pigs were originally a cloned version of a sort of like a wild boar and a human. Looks like the
Oh,
same skin, kind of, doesn't it?
I don't know about that, but it sounds kind of plausible. Yeah.
I don't know if there's any truth to it, but I mean, this is what some people suggest, and I've spoken to some people about it.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
that could be like the reference why they don't want to eat pork in different religions, and that pigs, the traditional pig, look like kind of a like human skin in a way.
hmm. That's definitely possible. I mean, the cult people going back to Atlantis have been hybridizing humans with all sorts of animals, and creating chimera and all sorts of different hybrids, for millennia. This is an ancient practice. So I wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying is true.
But do you think that what like Stuart Swerdlow talked about, this clones race between Atlantis, treaty between Atlantis and Lemuria, and the humans were created with reptilian DNA? Is there any truth to that?
Yes, there's a lot of truth to various parts of that. So humans, as we know them today, are the hybrid of a number of races. And actually, Stewart does a pretty good job in his books of describing that. He describes 40 something different races who combine their DNA to make the human. And I think a lot of that is very true and accurate. Um, yeah, there are different sources that give different amounts and types of the races that combine to make us. But it's definitely true that we have a lot of reptilian DNA. The Draco are not the only reptilians. The universe is full of different kinds, some good, some bad. There's an ancestral reptilian race that was here before humans on the Earth, and we're definitely hybridized with them. So yeah, we have a long history of being combined with other beings, and it's part of what makes us who we are. Yeah,
Did you ever see any alien beings, ETs or reptilians or anything manifest in Belgium at the Mothers of Darkness Castle, for example?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I saw Draco there. I saw Zeta Reticulans, Greys. I saw Orion Greys. I saw other beings that I probably couldn't identify even to this day. Yeah.
In what way did you see them? Did they just suddenly appear or manifest, or and how did it happen? Or were they there already? They took physical form, obviously, I would assume.
Yeah, yeah, physical form, I mean. on the spiritual plane, there's really no limit um, to what could appear. But yeah, I'm just talking on the physical plane. Um, yeah, some of them are in residence in that area. They do seem to live there, as far as I could tell. I mean, it's not like this was being explained to me at the time, but from what I gather, uh, yeah, some of them seem to live there and be there quite a lot. Some of them do precipitate from the higher dimensions and just spontaneously appear, from thin air. I definitely saw that happen a few times. There are rituals that are specifically designed to summon different reptilian overlords. So I witnessed some of those happening, and whether it was theatrics and a vibe in the room, or whether it was a literal manifestation from the higher dimensions, sometimes both. I definitely saw these things appear physically. Yeah.
And they looked and seemed real.
Yeah.
And what was the form, the height, the shape of them? I mean, if this is what you say, theatrics, you would have to be quite clever, right? If it's
Yeah.
something that's physically in front of you.
Yeah. Uh, well, some of the more imposing ones, like some of the Draco are also hybridized to a large extent, and they appear in a lot of different forms. The more imposing ones that appear more demonic would show up much taller, like easily 8 or 9 feet. Some of them would have wings. They'd have huge fangs. It would be like the spitting image of what you would think a demon would look like. So I've witnessed that. I mean, some of these beings are arguably, purely spiritual beings from the actual demonic realm of experience. And some of them are more like extraterrestrials, Draco. Yeah.
So those you're saying are from the demonic realm,
Hmm.
archons, perhaps? I mean, they also take physical form and manifest in physical form and look
Yeah.
like a winged dragon or something. I mean,
Yeah.
the depiction of a demon, which is probably where they got it from, could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they are not reptilian or what?
Uh, some are, some aren't. As I perceive them, I mean, people mean different things when they use these words, obviously. As I perceive them, archons are on a higher level. The demonic level is quite close to where we are. So their vibration is actually very, very close, yeah, to the human vibration. Um, so it's not that much of a leap for them to come here or for us to go there. And I think that's a large part of the basis for our collective imaginings of hell and things like this. And there's a reason why people's descriptions over the millennia have been so consistent with these things, because it's a very real realm, which is right next to ours. Um, as I perceive them, the archons are on a much higher level, and they're affecting things in a much more subtle way, sort of on the causal level, which is above our dimension. So that's how I perceive them. And they can show up in different ways. I mean, they can appear to our senses any way that they choose to appear. So that's kind of important to understand with higher beings, because two people looking at the same thing can be seeing totally different things. And each one is valid, because it's a matter of personal perception. Especially as the beings get more advanced, more telepathic, they can project whatever image they choose to project. Um, I actually, when I try to look at the archons and on a higher level with my inner sight, non-physically, um, generally what presents to me is this sort of squid form, and they have a form that's really very much like a giant squid in terms of what I see.
Like an
Uh,
octopus
yeah, sometimes.
with different arms?
Hmm.
Really? Well, that's an interesting thing. But I mean, so they're not physical, but can take physical form. Do you think that some people that are born psychopaths, do you think that they are a manifestation of an archon just in human form? Because some humans just simply are born without empathy.
It's definitely possible. Obviously, these things are easier to talk about on a case by case basis. Talking about it in the abstract is kind of hard. But generally, yes, I think that's very possible and it does happen.
Because nobody knows why some people are born psychopaths. They do say that those who are born with psychopathy, that's one thing, but then people that are sociopaths, they are created because of circumstances and trauma and what have you, like
Yeah,
narcissists.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a journey of learning that we're all on. Learning about the physiological causes, the biochemical causes, the spiritual causes, the social causes. Like it all goes together. All these paradigms have their truth, and I think they're all valuable. Yeah,
So with all the trauma you experiences and all that abuse and that constant madness, um, you maintained your human, let's say the human core, your
yeah,
empathy,
yeah.
because you seem like a very sensitive and very sort of very nice guy, actually.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel that way. A lot of survivors who come through the experience and don't choose to stay with the cult, it's a way to develop empathy really, really quickly. A lot of us have been made into empaths, those of us who survived, even if we, didn't have that much aptitude for empathy being born. Our circumstances have shaped us into empaths in a really radical way. Because we need that empathy to survive. I mean, we need to empathize with ourselves, which is the most foreign feeling thing to do if you're a survivor of mind control programming. Self-compassion is like, it feels like a poison, initially in the early phases when you're not used to it. So having to cultivate that over years and years really, really develops your empathy.
Did you cause yourself like self-harm or pain or something? I mean, were you like self-destructive in that way after you kind of went out of that whole circle
Yeah,
of cycle of
yeah,
madness?
absolutely. The cult often gives contradictory programming. They give you suicide programming and they also give you do not die programming. So you have this dialectic inside of you. And you're set up to fight yourself on a very deep level, on the deepest levels. This has been pretty described pretty well in From the Trenches. It's a collaborative book between Allison Miller and Wendy Hoffman. Um, and they talk about this dialectic where you're ordered both to survive and to kill yourself on request. So it's really intense torture. Yeah.
So did you experience, trying to commit suicide and then that other program trying to survive and stay alive that was also activated at the same time?
Absolutely. There were times when I was ordered to kill myself and I would start to do it and I would be stopped, and it became a matter of, well, discipline on some level, knowing to the extent that I had any conscious control, which was not very much, the decision whether to obey a command or not, and having to really learn my handlers and what they expected. Sometimes I'd be set up and a lower level handler would give me a command, and refusing the command, I would get a reward from a higher level handler, you know. So a lot of very intense mind games going on.
Did all of your handlers, I don't know how many you had, you can share that, did they all sexually abuse you?
The vast majority did, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's the bread and butter of this sort of mind control programming. Yeah, sexual trauma is just one of the most direct ways to force someone out of their body. So there's a reason it's been used since ancient times.
So did they do that because they were, well, pedophiles, or were they also programmed and have another sexuality really, but were able to be predators in this way?
In most cases, it's programmed. Yeah, pedophilia is actually extremely rare. The fact that it's so common in the cult is really because of programming.
So it's mostly because of programming, not because we hear about that more so than any other thing, really, that they're doing these things to children, right?
Yeah, yeah, they've been forced to do that. They've had their sexual desires twisted around. And very commonly, they've had the desire for power and the desire for sex very, very mixed up. So a lot of handlers or even survivors can't really distinguish between lust that's based on having power over someone else or being humiliated, and lust that's based on, their actual heart preferences.
A few years ago, obviously, was became very a huge scandal in England when it was known to everybody, came out publicly that Jimmy Savile had been like a procure, he had been like a handler, getting all these children for a lot of these top elite circles, and
Hmm.
possibly also the royal family and all of that.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
hear about the former Prime Minister Ted Heath and all these things. I mean, what do you know about this? You were in England also as a child. Have you ever
it
met Jimmy
was.
Savile?
Um, I have some memories that might be him, and actually, this would be good for me to look into. Um, yeah, I should do a little more research before I talk about that because I haven't looked into that at all. Um, but I definitely have some memories that could be that person. Um, yeah, I mean, children are just considered a resource worldwide. There are always children, whether they're from cult families, which is most common, they're bloodline people, or sometimes they're non-bloodline people that are just brought in from outside as expendable bodies. But anywhere you have these ritual abuse circumstances, you're going to have a lot of children being brought in and being raped. Yeah.
But many of those children are also being born and bred inside of the cult, right? That
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
non-registered
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah, that was the case for some of my family. I had a twin brother who, as far as I know, never received a birth certificate, never had a legal identity in the conventional sense. And he was used his whole life. Yeah, I have other siblings and half siblings that I barely know. Some of them were killed. I saw my half brother killed in front of my eyes. So yeah, a lot of my own family members didn't make it.
And you were also programmed to be a breeder, right? And you
Yes.
did that. We talked a little bit about that in part one.
Hmm.
But I mean, so from the time that you were sexually mature, what was that? You were even earlier than most people, children, right? And
Yeah.
you were used for breeding. I mean, how do you know how many children you might have?
I don't know exactly. I'm pretty confident it's over 100. Um,
Over 100.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this? I mean, for what reason and why did over 100? That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, this is big stuff. Um, I mean, the most obvious immediate reason is to produce more children for the cult to be using in some way, whether literally eating or raising, for other roles in the service of the cult. They're always looking for bodies and they're always looking for people, especially who don't have legal identities, that they can freely use without consequence. So that's a big reason. Um, they're looking for the next generation of handlers always. They're always thinking about the future. They're always thinking about the perpetuation of the cult. They have a very long-term vision, and it's very well organized. Some of the pairings between people are planned out generations in advance. There's a very long game of, yeah, different bloodline pairings that are arranged. So a lot of the women that I was forced to rape, or be raped with, or however it's said, um, were from different bloodlines that the cult was interested in breeding my family with. And they were people, women of all descriptions, of all different ages of fertility, of all different ethnic backgrounds and personal backgrounds. So I'm not privy to what sort of plans they had, but clearly they wanted my genes to be part of all these other bloodlines.
So you were forced to have sex with these grown women, or were they actually grown? They didn't extract semen from you. They forced you to do it, really.
Yeah, semen was also extracted. And this is very common, especially for the zeta reticulans. They'll extract genetic information in semen directly from the testes. So that also happened. And I also, in addition to what I'm talking about here, I also have hybrid children. I have children that are half zeta reticulan, quite a few of them.
Oh my God, really? Please explain this.
Yeah, they're from Zeta Reticulum. That's most of the ET races, the common names are just, we call them by the star that they come from. So, Arcturians, Sirians, Pleiadians, and so forth. So yeah, they're from the Zeta Reticulum star system. They're very commonly cited and celebrated in pop culture. They're the stereotypical Area 51 aliens.
Like the
Usually,
gray with the big eyes and all that.
yeah, yeah, with the big black eyes, usually 3.5 or 4 feet tall. Yeah, very skinny.
So
Usually,
they are the grays.
there are many different kinds of grays, and this is an example of convergent evolution, as far as I'm concerned. Just like there are many forms of human being in different places in the universe. The grays, often the ones I'm describing are from Zeta Reticulum, but there are also different humanoid beings that look very similar from all over the universe. So this is just a type of humanoid that kind of, has evolved. Um, yeah, I encourage people to be open to that, because, if they're being visited by grays or have had experiences with them, they can be of all kinds of orientations from all kinds of places. Yeah, or grays from the Orion system have been very prominent in my personal experience. And they look very similar to the Zeta Reticulans. Their skin is a little more whitish. They're usually more present, spiritually present. That's part of how I identify them. They have a more coherent vibration. They're an older race, so they've had more time to evolve and learn. Yeah, the Zeta Reticulans are pretty young in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, but generally, all of these different types of grays will be the same general description. The very large, very dark eyes, usually 4 fingers instead of 5. And there are versions of grays that are also us from the future. So,
I was just going to ask you that question, actually.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
people say that.
yeah. There are certain evolutionary paths where we wind up looking very much like them. Um, and, this is not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just one of the courses of evolution that's available. So I have perceptions of future versions of myself that are very much like that basically look like a Zeta Reticulan.
But is that
Yeah.
because they're trying to merge the two sexes even more to become androgynous and sexless in a way, and linking the human experience and soul structure with AI, artificial intelligence?
Yes, there's a lot of truth to those things. Um, Grays are not necessarily sexless. Some of them still are very gendered and reproduce sexually, just like we do. So it's not a universal characteristic. It is true of the Zeta Reticulan grays that they've mostly lost the ability to reproduce. And so they're interbreeding with us to create, to perpetuate their species. And a lot of other people talk about this, but probably Bashar is the most commonly known one. Daryl Anka talks about them quite a lot. And a lot of what he says is very accurate as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, so the Zeta Reticulans specifically have reproduced mostly through cloning in recent generations and also through interbreeding with humans. But there are many grays that retain sexual dimorphism and are very much like us sexually.
How sophisticated would you say that is the technology that they have today, the deep state, with cloning, also cloning humans and people we might see on television even?
The clones are very advanced now. They've had clones that can live for years and years, at least since the 1980s, in terms of what I've personally witnessed, probably before that. At this point, the clones are very, very, the cloning process is very seamless. I personally have a lot of clones that are still active
Of
um,
you, a
of
clone of
me.
you, really,
Yeah.
who look like you or what?
Yes. Yes.
So am I
Exactly
talking
like
to the
me.
real Alandra now?
As far as I'm aware, yes, I'm the real
Oh,
Alandra.
that would be nice. So
Yeah.
where where are those well, you gotta laugh a little bit, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, where so you were cloned. So where are those
Yeah.
clones now? They don't drop by for
They're all
oh,
over
not
the
dropping
planet.
by for a cup of coffee, right?
No. That would be a very unique experience, which I would kind of enjoy actually. If it was with consent and not with abuse, but uh yeah, no, they're all over the planet and also off planet. So a lot of my clones are still on the various bases in Saturn's rings, off planet. A lot of
They're
my
in
clones,
inside they're in Saturn's rings.
yeah,
Please. You
obviously that
have the
gets into a whole
floor,
other
Alhambra. Do go on.
that's a whole other can of worms. I understand that it's kind of hard to go in all these different directions, and each
No,
one
we
seems
talk
more
about everything here, and boy, have we heard a
okay.
lot. So let's hear more.
Okay, I appreciate that. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate your audience following along for things that probably seem each more preposterous than the last. But
It's up to each
yeah,
individual to be discerning or skeptical or whatever.
okay, I appreciate that, and yeah, thanks everybody for bearing with us. Um, yeah, so I have a lot of clones that are off planet. Some of them are in the rings of Saturn, as I was describing. So the physical home of Satan is basically Saturn. That's like if there's a physical place where Satan is located, that is it. Um, and it's arguable whether that's a physical entity or not, but the energy there is very much it's very dark. It's like a black sun, and some secret space program survivors talk about the Draco worshiping the black sun. That's very, very tied in with all of this. It's a Luciferian energy. It's also arguably a literal physical thing. So a lot of the mind control vibrations in our local solar system come from Saturn, and every nation on Earth, as far as I'm aware, has something like an embassy in Saturn's rings, and that's where the nations go to pay tribute to the physical Satan, essentially.
So,
Uh,
so different nations on Earth, they have a base or something in the rings of Saturn,
yeah.
and they go there to they can go there, and then
Hmm.
what is how does that? I mean,
Yeah.
well,
Uh, oh, maybe I should slow down a bit.
no,
Um,
don't go open that whole can of worms.
okay. Um,
But I mean, just want to say, I mean, science says that Saturn is a gas planet, right?
mm,
And then the on the top
I'm not
there's
sure.
this hexagon, right?
Hmm.
And Saturn, Satan, Santa, and all of the anagrams and all of that. And then
Yeah.
there was this famous book, The Ringmakers of Saturn, about how the beams are beaming this, or the rings are beaming this frequency, putting Earth on some kind of frequency control, right? That we've
Oh,
talked
I
about a
haven't heard of
lot.
that. That
So
that sounds
what
great.
would you say Saturn is, and what and the rings as well?
Uh, yeah. First off, before I forget, I definitely want to recommend Max Lowen. She has a lovely series of interviews with survivors, and they talk about She talks about all the different nations having to pay tribute to Satan, and how it's all organized and set up. So yeah, some of it is physically on Saturn, some of it is on Earth, and it goes through the Vatican. And she talks about that in great detail. So I strongly recommend her.
What was the
Um,
name again? Sorry.
Max Lowen.
Max
Um,
Lowen.
yeah. hmm Yeah.
That can be looked up on YouTube or
Yeah, yeah. She's not on YouTube. She's mostly on Rumble. Her website is unbroken.global. And
okay.
yeah, she's got some good interviews with survivors. Yeah. So yeah, I'll just say
But
that.
tell us your experience or whatever you've learned about this. And so Saturn is a physical planet, not a gas planet, you think?
Uh, well, my experience is mostly in the rings. I'm not sure if I've spent time on the surface. Probably not.
But you've been to
Uh,
the rings,
yes.
and
Mhm.
that's where we really need to hear an in-depth story.
Yeah. Um, Well, some of my memories here are still fuzzy, and sometimes I do doubt if these are spiritual or physical experiences. Uh, so I just want to give a few disclaimers there. Um, but I've definitely had the felt experience of being in the rings, and I've definitely been there physically at least a few times, by means of physical transportation was brought there. Um, and yeah, there are. Uh, Essentially, I mean, very large facilities that are set up specifically uh, for satanic worship, that I personally experienced. I mean, I kind of started this whole thread by saying I have clones there, which is true. And they're using my clones and the clones of other people around the world, sometimes as a kind of voodoo doll to try to target the person, as a spiritual attack on the original person. Um, and other times, they try to siphon parts of your soul through your clones into these rituals and these processes. Um, so I think those are some purposes that they have clones of me there for, and maybe other purposes that I'm not aware of. But many of the people on Earth that the cult considers important, whether friends or enemies of the cult, have clones which are on Saturn, and people are being attacked in this way through their clones. Obviously, most people are not conscious of this. um, but yeah, I just happen to have seen this like firsthand.
So, I
Um,
mean, firsthand, how does this even work technically? How can you, are you like being transported to the Saturn or the rings? And what are the rings? And then you rotate on bases that are rotating around
yeah,
the planet? Or please
yeah,
explain, because all of these questions, the audience will obviously have a lot of questions here.
yeah. Well, it's important to remember the scale of things. So Saturn's really huge, and these asteroids that are in its rings are very, very large. Some of them are the size of our moon or larger. So these are, the experience when you're on them is like being on a planet. It's not like, oh, I'm on this little prince kind of kind of tiny world, where you're as big as the world is. These are very, very large planet-sized chunks. So when you're on them, they have their own gravity. There are various technologies, that can help humans kind of exist in the very heavy gravity, around Saturn. I'm not super well versed in all the technicalities there. But I know I was able to walk around there, and feel more or less like, an Earth gravity, and was able to breathe and stuff like this. Um, so they create conditions on the base, on these asteroids, that are suitable for humans to do their thing. Um, yeah. And these are
And how are you taken there? Is that through teleportation or how does that work?
sometimes by conventional transportation ships. The Zeta ships can go faster than light, so it's really a simple matter. In terms of what I experienced, it only takes a few minutes to go anywhere within the solar system. Because they're moving faster than light, and it's very simple. So, I mean, from our reference point, that's basically teleportation for most intents and purposes. Um, but then there are also more obvious forms of teleportation, jump gates that other survivors have talked about. Um, I've been through those. Those are a real thing. And there are locations on Earth where you can just walk through this portal, and one moment you're on Earth, and the next moment you're on an asteroid around Saturn. So that was also a means of transportation. Yeah.
Hidden, obviously, but underground, where not just in some
Yeah.
parts of nature, right?
Primarily underground. Yeah. Um, one of the
And this
most
is a deep
obvious.
state military thing on a
Yeah.
base, or something.
Yeah. One of the most obvious ones is under Cheyenne Mountain in the United States. They
That close to where you live?
no, it's not close to where I live. It's way further to the east, and more of the central west of the United States. Yeah. But there is actually a very, very large military base on the eastern side of Mount Shasta, where they probably also have a jump gate. Yeah.
How many bases have you been to? Or do you remember
Ugh.
being taken to? Can you mention some of them?
At least 20. Um,
In the United States or in Europe as
yeah.
well?
In the U if we're talking abroad, then uh easily 50 that I've been to
50 in
personally.
Europe.
Yeah, and all over the planet. Yeah.
Where are those bases? Can you mention some of them? How does it work? What does it look? How are you taken there? This would be near where other people live.
Yeah, this is true. A lot of them are near urban areas, yeah. So if people are have been following stuff about the secret space programs, a lot of what I say is not going to be that surprising. So there are jump gates between all these different locations, so you can also jump on Earth from place to place. That's usually reserved for the elite people. Um, the the people that are just super soldiers or otherwise conscripted into these programs will mostly be taking the underground high-speed rails. So we have a rail system underneath the U.S. And globally, which is high-speed trains. I think probably magnetic trains, um, and that whole system has been around um, since at least the 50s or 60s. So we have this whole alternate rail system. It's kind of funny because, in the US, like it's hard for us to maintain a functional, normal civilian rail system. We barely have one. But the trillions of dollars that the Pentagon gets are going underground, and we have a very, very advanced, very well maintained rail system underground. And it can take you from coast to coast in a very short time. Yeah, I mean, under an hour probably.
So a
So,
lot faster than traveling by plane.
yeah.
And how deep underground are those that rail system?
Um, I'm kind of guessing, but I probably about 6 miles underground,
6 miles underground, and that's where a lot
more
of
or less.
the underground bases are as well on that level, or
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and they also go under the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
But that must be pretty also far down, huh?
Yeah. Um, Again, I hope other whistleblowers can come forward who are more well versed in the technicalities. I really don't have much of a mind for engineering, but
But have
so
you experienced it
but yeah, I have experienced it. Yeah.
as a child? So
Yeah.
where were you taken from and to?
Uh, well, a lot of my experience revolved around Air Force bases. So there's a big one in Eastern Texas, near San Antonio, Texas. There's the main one where a lot of the Zeta Reticulans are the most present are in Colorado, underneath the Four Corners area, especially Colorado and New Mexico. There's a gigantic Air Force base around Colorado Springs, and the underground facilities go for miles and miles and miles, like well past the Colorado border into neighboring states. So those are some very obvious ones that I was brought to.
And they talk
Um,
about a huge underground facility underneath the Denver International Airport.
yeah, yeah, this is true. Yeah. And yeah, I mean the Denver airport has been you know, some of the most open display of of, satanic arrogance. And a lot of people have talked about that. I mean, if you've ever even flown through there, it's like quite obvious.
Well, I have, and I've seen this gargoyle or whatever it's called, this reptilian-looking dragon, whatever devil that they have on display there, and these murals of the walls of paint and whatever,
Yeah.
paintings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another level. Um, an experience that's more personal for me, which is less widely known about in association with the Montauk Project, is McClellan Air Force Base, which was formerly in Sacramento, California. So that's quite close to where I am now. That's about 3 hours to the southeast of Mount Shasta.
So
Um,
now you're
and
taking us from your timeline now, your experiences in this life, in this lifetime, and then you must please tell the audience where we're going now, because now we're
sure.
going into another cycle, life experience. Alandra, what
Well,
was your name? What is this all about?
yeah, yes and no, because actually there's a lot of overlap with this here and now body. And I was taken to some of the same places in this here and now body. So it's not an entirely separate experience. It blends into this one in ways that I still don't fully understand.
But
Um,
you were born in 1986, right? In
yeah.
this vessel.
Hmm.
Right. And then before that, who were you?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we can go there. Um, yeah. So before that, I was born in 1970, um, and I was brought to Montauk in 1974. So that is a different body from this one, arguably a different timeline. Um,
And let's just address that to the audience. So it's
yeah.
not on this timeline that we're on now. Is it a
Uh,
parallel dimension of Earth or what?
well, timelines are, uh, by their nature, infinite. This is not something that the cult made up. Time itself is a braid. It's a very complex, beautiful structure, where many things are happening at the same time. All of us have parallel timeline experiences. Whether or not we're survivors of the secret space programs, this is a normal part of life. Like we all have these parallel aspects, and it's something we're coming into consciousness of as a species at this time. And so this is a much bigger thing than just something that affects survivors of mind control. This is a global awakening process that we're all part of. And we're all waking up to our parallel versions, our past and future lives, and all these, permutations of who we are. This is just a natural part of the ascension of planet Earth.
And
Yeah.
time only exists on this three-dimensional plane. And once you go above that or wherever, time dissolves or time is not existing or what?
It doesn't exactly dissolve, but it becomes much more expansive. Um, Actually, kind of a fun way to think about it is in the Kurt Vonnegut novel Cat's Cradle. He's describing the perspective of some ETs. This is a fictional book that is not about mind control. But he's basically saying, like, the way we move time through time in the perspective of the ETs is like we're riding a roller coaster backwards, and all that we're conscious of is what's moving behind us. But in the higher dimensions, they can see the whole space, the whole three-dimensional space, and they can see everything to all sides. So that's a nice little kind of fun metaphor to think about it. It's not that time is not real necessarily, but it's more like we're living only in one dimension of it. And there are many, many other dimensions.
So it's a construct in the matrix, and all of the timelines exist simultaneously. Is that how it is?
Uh, yeah, that's mostly true for me. I mean, the false reality matrix exaggerates the duality that we're living in. It exaggerates the limitations of living on a single timeline. It
False
creates,
reality matrix. Please explain that to the audience.
oh, sure. Well, everyone's going to have their own personal understanding here. Um, but yeah, the reality that we're living in is heavily manipulated. Um, this is not to say that time itself is a manipulation, because it's not. Like, time is an organic thing that we're meant to experience. It's not a trap or a trick. It's just the way it is. Um, but what the cult does and what the Draco do and the Archons and other parties that are involved in this process is make the natural constrictions of living in time and space even more severe. And everything is, as I was saying, exaggerated. So kind of the anguish of, having a very limited perspective is very exaggerated. Um, yeah, our natural state involves our higher senses being awake, and it involves all of us being aware of time beyond time, we can say. So the natural state of the human being is to experience all of this stuff that I'm talking about as a normal thing. The fact that we're not experiencing that, that's the mind control, that's the manipulation, basically. Having our higher senses cut off, having our soul memories blurred, these are manipulations that have been perpetrated on us. Yeah.
Hmm. And the abilities that we probably have or had in the
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
before
All the
this,
many,
that
many
let's say the
abilities.
pineal gland was calcified and we were dumbed
Yeah.
down on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, Pineal gland calcified, heart center shut off in many, many diabolical ways. We can definitely talk fruitfully about different, yeah, physical aspects of the body and higher abilities that we have. We're all naturally telepathic, for instance. I mean, that's an obvious one. Um, I mean, even when we're cut off from that ability, like, we all still have very strong intuition, and we communicate on many levels, beyond just speech and body language. So, this is a normal thing. Yeah.
Definitely. And we all experience that a lot.
Yeah.
So that timeline you're talking about, was you in another dimension, or was it still in this dimension just before you were born into this body in 1986? You were born in
It's this
1970.
dimension. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same dimension. It's all in 3D. So these are literal physical experiences.
And
And
before you go
there's
into it, well, describing it, which is what I'm looking forward to, how do you know this to be true? How do you know that you existed at that time? How is that even possible to know? Was that through meditation or retrieving memories that I mean, you haven't lived that life now.
uh well, it's again, it's I have and I haven't. Like, they're both true. Because the person that had that experience, that was born in 1970, is now in this body and is part of me. Like, we're having this experience together. So it's not a normal past life that we all have, where there's a full separation from the body and from the consciousness. I mean, your soul is obviously continuous. This is a little bit different, because the ego of that person, the normal limited human consciousness of that person, is also with me now. So that's been retained. And
So you were
basically,
merged in some kind of way, or
yeah.
on a
Hmm.
soul level, or is it the same soul, your soul that existed then and then was merged into whatever was a baby that was born in 86, which is you now?
Yeah, it's both. So this body was born in 86 and lived with just the host consciousness for a few years. 1993 is when we merged. So this body was already, 6 or 7 years old, um, when when that person from 1970 joined us. So we were joined together in 1993, and our perspectives kind of merge at that time. Yeah, although we still have memories, speaking in the plural now.
Who
Um,
merged you? How do you know? And what happened?
well, we were merged, as I understand it, through technology. essentially bringing that person into this body by consciousness transfer. Um, I wish I had more details about how this actually works, but
So
the
they
experience,
can they can take or retract or extract or whatever, take consciousness from one person or a timeline and put it into another
yeah. I,
body
I I
consciousness.
should also say this is part of what they're using the clones for. Um, so they will take people who are going through mind control, they will transfer your consciousness into a clone body. And then your experience from that point is from the clone's perspective. Sometimes this is temporary, sometimes it's permanent. They can shift you in and out, or they can, in some circumstances, they can trap you in the clone body, and then that's your perspective from that point.
And do the cloned body have a soul essence or soul?
Mm, Not much. There's sort of a residue of soul essence as I perceive it. But they're not ensouled in the way that a normal human is. Yeah.
And also, if there are many versions of us in different parallel realities in this multiverse, are we the same soul? Your versions of you in other realities, versions of me in other realities, is that the same soul?
In most cases, yes. Yeah.
So that soul is experiencing a lot at the same time, right?
Yeah, it sure is. This is part of how we grow. Yeah. Souls are very, very vast things. A single body is not going to encompass a soul. Souls are capable of living in many, many bodies simultaneously.
One
Both
soul,
one soul. Yeah.
but the same look, the same me or the same you or whoever,
Yeah, the same person, basically.
but
hmm
not the same, not two different people like a mother and a father or whatever. I mean, it's the same being, the same type of person, version of you.
Uh,
Is
More or
that,
less.
am I even able to make myself clear here, or should I rephrase that?
Uh, yeah, maybe try rephrasing.
Okay, so um, one soul can inhabit only a lot of versions of me or a lot of versions of you or other people that look the same but have different experiences and different parallel realities. But
Oh,
one soul cannot inhabit or be inside two different people, right?
oh no, in my opinion, that's also possible. Two different people can have the same soul. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that like a twin flame or?
Sometimes it can be experienced that way. Most commonly, the people just live their own lives and they don't necessarily meet each other. Um, yeah. I mean, I have this experience. I'm conscious of my own soul as inhabiting many bodies, beyond all these trauma experiences that I've had. This is a thing that old souls can do. Old souls can make many versions of themselves and live many different lives. And
Right
it's
now, this timeline, in this.
yeah, right now, same timeline.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go to the Montauk experience. You were born 1970. What was your name then?
Yeah. I was born as Max in that lifetime. Yeah.
Max.
So yeah.
And did you look like you or somebody else?
No, I was a different body. I had a darker hair and a little bit more pale skin with kind of freckles, a little more Irish looking. Um, and yeah, a little bit of a bigger body, not as skinny as I am now. It was identifiably a different person. Yeah.
Born to some other bloodline family or?
Yeah, I'm not sure of Max's bloodlines. But yeah, born to a couple in Patchogue, Long Island. And not a cult family, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if they're bloodline or not. Probably not. This body definitely is, but I'm pretty sure that body wasn't. Um, and yeah, I had aspects of it was a much less traumatic experience, to be honest. because I had a normal womb experience. Like I had my very first years were in a, you know, not 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 entirely healthy, but not like a trauma-based mind control environment. You know, it was a relatively normal environment in my first years of that body. And then I was brought to Montauk at the age of 4, when I had just turned 4. Um,
Why were you, if they were not part of the space secret space program or part of the Illuminati?
Probably because I was identified on a soul level, to be honest. Um, yeah, I
By
mean,
non-entities working with these people.
yeah,
So you
yeah,
were
by
selected, and your parents at the time said, "Oh, take our child," or what?
yeah, basically. I mean, I during that time, my father had left and my mother was quite desperate and didn't feel like she could raise me. So when the Air Force people came by and offered her a contract and promised me a great education and a great future, she was really into that. So she didn't really know what was happening. But she signed a contract that essentially sold me to the Air Force. Yeah.
Did you see her again?
Um, I think maybe once when I was about 13. Yeah, and that would be it. Yeah.
So you were brought up there with no love or empathy around you, or what was the training?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Montauk as a whole is its own story. Um, it was messy. It was complex. Montauk was not as well organized as some of the other things I'm describing. Um, Montauk was an experiment in many senses, not least of which a social experiment. Also, the cult and aspects of the government were starting to work together in ways that they had not before. So some of these collaborations between the governments and the cults are new. Some of them are quite ancient, but also some of them are pretty new. And a lot of people have talked about this aspect, bringing over the Nazi scientists after World War II and having them integrated with the U.S. military um, and learning, I mean, starting to take a more scientific approach to trauma-based mind control, which historically had been the expertise of the cult, and sharing that knowledge, sharing that, between intelligence communities, military communities, and the cult leadership. So, the forms of collaboration that they're engaging with now, some of them are new, and Montauk was a big uh, proving ground for some of that stuff. So the programming was yeah, it was very sloppy. Which is part of why a lot of Montauk survivors are able to remember what happened. It's part of why you have so many whistleblowers coming forward from Montauk specifically, and not as many from other aspects of the secret space programs. Because Montauk was so messy, because we were allowed to retain memories, because we were shown empathy at different times, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The whole thing was so sloppy that a lot of us have at least partial memories of the experience, which is not the case with a lot of Montauk's successor projects, which are all over the world, and a lot of different secret space programs. A lot of survivors after that, the mind control was much more uh, streamlined, and so people's memories are not clear, and sometimes they don't come back at all. There are so many unconscious survivors walking around who have absolutely no fragments of memory whatsoever because the mind control technology and the discipline has improved since then, which is quite a dim prospect for our truth community. But also people are evolving to meet the new challenges. But yeah, this is a reason that a lot of Montauk survivors have been able to recognize each other and retrieve their memories, because it's very patchy. Yeah.
There was something called the Montauk chair, and we know that they were experimenting on humans, obviously, and there were aliens there, ETs, and also the time travel, obviously, and teleportation.
Hmm.
We know the story of Preston Nichols, Phil
Hmm.
Schneider, Al
Hmm.
Bielek. and
Yeah.
Duncan Cameron. Do you
Yeah.
know any of these? Did you meet in this form you were in as Max?
Yeah.
You meet and know
Yeah.
any of these people?
I sure did. Duncan was my favorite. He was a sweetheart. And he really helped me a lot. Speaking about experiencing empathy, I mean, he was one of the adults who was showing empathy, and part of what kept me really in touch with my conscience was his presence and his guidance. I mean, he was like me, he was operating on a lot of perceptual levels simultaneously. So in order to sustain that, you kind of have to have compassion and empathy. So I really liked him, and he kind of helped me stay sane. Um, Preston was extremely erratic and terrifying. His alters were very, very different from one another. So um, one moment he would seem very calm and, at least superficially compassionate. And then another moment, something would be unleashed and he would just be utterly terrifying. I mean, like a demon. I mean, literally possessed or something. So he was very scary
What did he
and
do to you?
uh a lot of things. I mean, he was running a lot of the machines. He raped a lot of us pretty regularly. Um, Yeah, I mean, he was overseeing a lot of the processes that were going on, and that was part of why the whole project was so disorganized because his leadership was very disorganized. He'd be in the middle of a task and he would just switch alters and totally become non-functional. So, yeah,
So he was clearly and severely under mind control.
very
MK Ultra?
severely. Yes, yes, definitely. hmm
Was that was that MK Ultra
Yeah,
programming?
yeah. I mean, that's obviously an outdated name, but similar things, successor projects. Yeah,
But it's also from that time, basically. They do say that the MK Ultra program was stopped in 1973, but
yeah,
obviously it went on a much bigger scale and in a
yeah.
different way.
And
And since the Nazi scientists and Operation Paperclip and all of that, did you ever see some of these Nazi scientists like
yes,
Josef
yes, I did.
Mengele and all these people?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you see
Um,
Mengele?
yep, yep. I have.
Please do talk about that.
Well, he's also been cloned. So I mean, he shows up all over the place. Yeah. It was even considered standard for a while, like textbook mind control programming, to have him personally involved, or one of his clones. Or as the technology got more sophisticated, holographic images of him that appeared real. So he's been duplicated in many ways, and that's part of the reason he shows up in so many different survivors' testimonies around the world, is because it's a clone of him, it's a hologram, it's some version of him. But
But
they
what
found
about
his.
the real him, the original Josef Mengele? They do say he died in 1979. Was that the year?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Uh,
I'm not sure about that. Maybe
yeah,
it's later or around that time, but I don't.
yeah,
That's what they kind of talk about.
yeah. Well,
But
I definitely
what
experienced
was
him.
your experience?
Uh, well, he hmm, he was introduced to me. Probably this would be uh yeah, 75 or so, like as part of the Montauk experience. Um, and actually, I'm still piecing some of this together because I've had a lot of later experiences with what I think were his clones. So that were from a later time and also from this body.
Oh,
And he
you
went by
also
the.
experienced him in this body on you
Yeah,
as
yeah,
Alandra or
yeah.
whatever your
hmm
name is. Yes.
Yes, as me. Um, yeah, he was often called Dr. Green or Dr. Greenbaum. That was a common pseudonym for him to use.
We often hear Dr. Green.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of other survivors talk about this because it was used on a lot of people. Um, Sometimes it was him personally, sometimes not, but um, yeah,
Can you confirm the testimonies of Arizona Wilder, Kathy O'Brien, Bryce Taylor, and a lot of these people that come out publicly and talk about it.
I'm just starting to learn about these people, actually. I haven't really looked into it. And I know it's going to help me a lot and probably validate a lot of things. I have every reason to believe they're telling the truth. I can be more detailed after I actually watch their videos and read their books and stuff.
Oh, you
Uh,
haven't seen that. That's amazing,
no,
though. So you're coming
no.
from your own perspective, not having heard a lot of, because a lot of those things are what they're talking about as well. And obviously,
Okay.
Dr. Green and all of these, the same kind of experiences, which a lot of people actually say that was a survivor of MK Ultra or mind control or Montauk as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I just picked up Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America. I've gotten like, I don't know, 20 pages into it or something. Um, and I also picked up Makia's book from seeing him on your show, Makia Freeman. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very grateful for that. So I picked up that book and I'm like, I don't even know most of these names. So I I'm just learning for the first time. Yeah, and yeah, maybe
Great.
maybe later on I can speak more specifically to things that they talk about. But yeah.
Okay, that's so interesting. So Preston Nichols, that is quite a famous name for those who've been
Hmm.
researching what is the Montauk base, was
Hmm.
not an easy guy. How about Phil Schneider?
I don't know if I met this person. I have to look into that. Um, yeah, I actually haven't really looked into his testimony or anything like that. So, um,
Well, that's a
uh,
very interesting story involving reptilians and other alien species and his involvement with Montauk and his killing as well in 95. There's a testimony from at least 93 or something on YouTube and on other channels, which is
oh,
interesting to go
yeah,
into if you haven't done that. But maybe you knew
yeah,
him. What about Al Bielek, who was this
yeah,
time traveler?
yeah. Well, Al helped me tremendously also, especially later on as a free person. He was one of the first people, aside from myself, who talks about the Ontarians. And those are like some of my main ET helpers. That's my soul tribe. They're very close to my heart. So I was really thrilled when I found his videos and he was talking about the same beings that I was very familiar with. It's actually part of what helped me start to believe myself more and validated my experience. So that was very valuable for me.
Listening to Al Bielek.
Yeah, as an
Yeah.
adult, yeah,
He has
very.
some amazing testimonies that he's given about his time travel to the future and also the Philadelphia experiment. He seemed like a really nice guy, didn't he?
Yeah. I believe I encountered him on base a few times. I didn't have as many interactions with him as I did with like Duncan and Preston, but because they were there like every day, basically. Um, yeah, Al or the Camerons or whatever you want to call them. They yeah, I don't remember like having as much interaction with him, but I do remember seeing him there. Yeah.
Okay. What about Stuart Swerdlow then that we've had on the show? Would he confirm that you were there, do you think?
I don't know. Uh, I mean, I'm in a different body, so so it's especially hard to verify.
But would
Uh,
he remember, do you think, that body that you had at that time? I mean, did you ever encounter Stuart Swerdlow there?
I believe I did. And I don't know. I think chances are decent. It's worth asking. I've been meaning to get in touch with him. Yeah.
Talk about some of the things that you were involved with. Some of the You were on missions. You experienced this teleportation and time travel. You were in this device, this chair, right?
Yeah, this is true. Um, yeah, the initial version, other people have described it. It was a very kind of flat and long chair, roughly similar to a dentist chair and sort of how it was laid out, reclining, connected to a bunch of different equipment, a lot of kind of 1970s looking computer things, a lot of wires and Preston was always fixing something or other, because there were a lot of moving parts. Generally speaking, we would have monitors attached to our heads and our temples, and our brain waves would be monitored. There was like a green screen. You know how computers used to have like just all green or all orange text. Yeah, it was sort of like that. So we'd have these like very primitive readouts, um, really relating to brain waves and things. Um, yeah, I'm just feeling for if I can add something to the description.
So
Uh,
primitive technology, although you could time travel and use teleportation to go to another timeline, to go to the future, to go to the past, and go from one place to the other in a matter of a second or something, even though the technology was very 1970s.
yeah,
How does that work?
it is kind of funny. Well, well, the Zeta were helping us quite a bit. I mean, us, I don't know if I identify with this anymore, but I was very trained to identify with it. Um, yeah, the Zeta were helping the people on the base with a lot of this stuff, and kind of giving a steady trickle of ideas and occasionally technology, but usually just inspiration. They were working with the Air Force scientists, with uh, the corporate people, with the Air Force people. They were kind of giving them inspiration and ideas. There was a collaborative process, but all the tools, for whatever reason, all the tools to actually hook up to the chair had to be of human design exclusively. So that was why, it was just period appropriate technology. Um, there were things that we brought back from the future, which people attempted to reverse engineer, usually unsuccessfully, because there are some principles of future technology that are totally beyond where we're at now. Um, so there were things that would come. So I've described this in other interviews, but my experience of it was essentially as a long tunnel, in terms of what I saw in the chair. Um, and the tunnel it would usually have very washed out colors, or sometimes I would perceive it in grayscale. And that was the way that we would go to other places. This is not like a jump gate. Like when I describe a jump gate going from Earth to Saturn, for instance, that's a very ancient technology, and it's very, very seamless. That's not of human design. But everything at Montauk was basically, made by human people. And we were trying to use some of the same, they were trying to use some of the same principles um, that the jump gates used. I mean, some people on base were aware of the jump gates and some weren't. But everything was their own reverse engineered version of things. Yeah, so it was, yeah, it had almost um, like an analog kind of feel to it. Like I still get a little bit emotional when I'm around like analog stereo equipment, because that was a big part of what was happening at Montauk, and something that Preston specialized in, obviously, tube amps and like all this analog audio stuff that he was into. Um, and that was part of the experience there. We're using all this 60s and 70s kind of technology. Um, I'm getting a little disorganized here.
So you were in the chair, you were put in the chair, you traveled to the future or to the past, or what was these experiences? Please talk about some of those.
Yeah. Uh, we were sent all kinds of places. Sometimes I would do the wrong thing, and I would move through dimensions instead of through time. That was very common for me. Penny Bradley talks about this too, actually, if you haven't seen her stuff, or she might be a nice guest. Yeah, she's very detailed about the Montauk experience. She has her own channel. I really like her a lot. I met her at the conference in Florida, the Full Disclosure Now conference. Yeah, so that's yeah, recommend her. And she gives great detailed explanations. Her memories are way more clear than mine in some of these areas. Um, yeah, but they sent us throughout time and throughout dimensions, and so sometimes, yeah, I had some of those experiences are beyond description because I would be moving not just in time and space, but also in levels of perception. And I would find myself in quite different spiritual realms sometimes. Um, but in terms of what I was actually being ordered to do and what I was trying to do, um, which I didn't always succeed in. I was being sent mostly to different locations in the past, sometimes in the future, but primarily the past, to interact with different situations that the Draco handlers were interested in influencing. So they already have the technology to look at timelines, just like reading a book. They already have that. They've had that for generations. So for them, this is basically a normal thing.
But can't they
Um,
just go back and forth and change things themselves if they want it changed?
um, to an extent, there's an aspect of events that are quite fixed. And yeah, I and also karma plays into it. You have to have a personal karmic connection to the situation in order to meaningfully influence it most of the time. Because there are spiritual rules that govern the unfolding of events. So if you come in as a total stranger with no karmic connection to the situation, your ability to influence it is going to be quite limited. Basically, you don't have skin in the game, because what actually causes events to happen is not just decisions made in the moment, but there's karmic energy which is the seed of all experience. So you have to tune into that karmic energy if you're going to make a big impact in the timeline. Yeah.
And where did you go back to? Where were you sent back to? To what experiences?
I'm still recalling bits and pieces every day of different places that I went to. Um, yeah, I have other survivors that I talk to. This is like a normal thing for me. They'll just be like, "Hey, you remember this?" And initially, maybe I'll say no, and then I'll sit with it for a bit, and I'll start getting goosebumps. I'll be like, "Oh, I'm still recalling a lot of different situations." People still
Can you
approach me
recall one
now.
or two experiences for us?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, one of the ones that I've spoken about a few times is I was brought back to be with some of my ancestors, specifically in France. There used to be a cathedral in Reims, France, where they would crown the king or emperor or whatever it was. Obviously, this is from a child's perspective. I should do some historical research so I can talk about it in more exact ways. But I was brought back to the French court, the French royal court, and forced to participate in satanic rituals that were happening then in the 1300s in medieval times. So yeah, that's one that's very obvious that I can talk about.
And how did you
Um,
go back again?
how did I get back to this timeline?
Yeah, to
Uh,
Montauk.
well, I'd use the same tunnel basically. Um,
So the chair goes along. I mean, that also travels with you.
Well, the
Wow.
chair the chair stays, but the time tunnel ideally stays. This was not always the case. Sometimes we'd have to find another way back. But if everything was going as planned, um, the tunnel would be stable, and it would be very much like a physical tunnel that you could just return to and walk back through, without any special effort. So that's what happened when things were going well. Um, uh, when things were not going well, I and other members of the project would get stranded at different places in time and space. And we'd have to wait until somebody from base could come and access us in some way. So that definitely happened as well. Um,
So you
And
had
then
to
there,
stay at a specific location in order to wait for them to come and get you
more or less, yeah, um, yeah, more
without
or
being
less,
discovered by whoever was existing at that time.
yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of safety in the fact that people in that time period, for instance, literally would not believe their eyes if they saw something like that. You know, there's this is a real thing that we counted on. You know, people dissociate from
Well, we wouldn't
experience.
believe our eyes today if we saw it, would we?
That, yeah, this is true. I mean, that's true. The same thing is true now. It gives you a little bit of a buffer, you know, because even if people do see something, they're gonna think they're crazy, you know. So you don't have to be perfect about these things, thank goodness. Uh,
But how
yeah,
would you even blend in? Because if you were sent back to a specific timeline, what about the clothes, the attire you were wearing?
yeah. Um, well, a couple times I was sent in naked, so uh,
Naked? And how did you
yeah,
get some clothes? And who did you meet? And what did how did these people um, uh, receive you?
yeah. Uh, well, in some of the situations, I was sent into satanic rituals that were very much like the ones I experienced later in this body. And so the presence of a naked child, honestly, would be kind of normal, unfortunately. So that definitely happened. Um, and then, yeah, other times, my recall is not perfect, but there were times when I was just found and you know, just treated like like a any child left on a doorstep, as it were. Um, you know, given clothes and things and taken care of in one way or another. Um, yeah, it's in a random situation, you know, most people will respond compassionately and try to help, you know. So that's another thing that we could always count on, and that we use to manipulate people in various time periods. You know, because the first inclination of most average people is just to try to help and, you know, not to like be violent or whatever.
But
Yeah.
you know, Alandra, we're only like scratching the surface here with the
Yeah.
questions that I have and things you're talking about and
Yeah.
things we have to get into. I mean, we hardly started, it seems. And
Yeah.
now
Well,
we've reached that point where we gotta leave the conversation like this is totally, like literally a cliffhanger. You time jumping back to the medieval times, and we have
yeah.
not even scratched the surface. But if we
Yeah.
end today, that means a part three is coming along very soon then.
I guess it's imminent. Yeah.
This was a fascinating part two, and I'm looking forward to part three then, Alandra.
Me too. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And it was
Yeah.
wonderful having you on again, and then
Mm.
I'll talk to you soon and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Yeah. Wonderful to be here. Talk soon.
Thank you so much to Alandra Markman, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruthtv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, ageoftruthtv as well. Please also subscribe to our alternative channels on BitChute and Brighteon. Your support is greatly appreciated and very needed. And on behalf of the Age of Truth TV team, we thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.